Hey guys, what's going on? Steven back again, and I'm back with another Walking Dead video from Ty Swell. And the topic for today's video is comic characters excluded or changed significantly in the Walking Dead television series. There was quite a few characters that definitely got changed. Obviously, many different reasons why that could happen. Showrunner changes. We've gone through quite a few different showrunners and stuff like that in the entire show, so I'm sure Frank set all these characters up to go in this direction, but he's fired, and second showrunner comes in and now all these characters are going in this direction instead. Of course, actors quit, actors get fired, so that changes things. Like the one I can think of is Jesus. He was not happy with the direction his character was going at the end of season 8. He was basically just a side character at that moment, so he wanted off the show, which is unfortunate. I kind of wish he would have stuck around for one more season. Hey, Gimple's out, a new showrunner's coming in. All right, I'll give it a shot. New showrunner, maybe things will be different and stuff like that. I don't know if you could sign just a 1-year contract or something like that just to see, because in case if you're right the whole season and at the end of the season you're still alive but you're not happy and you still want off the show, now you gotta kind of walk it all back and be all right, I gotta kill this character off somehow, and try to change things. I'm sure it's different for a side character or something like that, just bring in some actor and be hey, you're going to be here for 1 season. You're going to premiere on the first episode. You're going to die on episode 15. That's it. Cut and dry, So I don't know if they could have done that with a major character like Jesus, but it still would have been cool. But yeah, it is still a shame. We missed out on quite a bit of really cool stuff. The him and Negan fight would have been awesome. But in the end, he did get, I would probably say, the second most iconic death in the entire show. Obviously, I'm counting Glenn and Abraham as one, since it was done by the same character in the same episode. So he did get that at least. Carl basically got fired, so that changed quite a bit of the show. Dale quit when Frank got fired, so that changed quite a bit as well. And some characters just never got a chance. Andrea, sadly her character was just butchered to the ground, basically, after hearing about, how she was in the comic and stuff like that. It's damn, we missed all that. That would have been badass, but, yeah, sadly, her character just never got a chance. So, yeah, quite a bit of stuff changed. Daryl. Daryl changed quite a bit. Nothing against Norman Reedus, awesome dude and stuff like that, playing as him in Death Stranding 2 right now. But yeah, he definitely threw a wrench into a lot of things, because I believe Tyrese and Abraham were both supposed to be Rick's right-hand man and stuff like that, but Daryl kind of took that role, so that kind of pushed them off to the side. So yeah, lots of different things changed, so it is what it is. Alright, so anyways, let's get on to the video, so here we go.
Alright folks, today I'm here to discuss every notable character in the Walking Dead comics that never got an adaptation or were changed significantly in the show when compared to their comic counterparts.
Okay.
Now, there are a ton of characters within the series at varying levels of importance, so in order for this video to not be extremely boring and filled with random background faces nobody knows, I've come up with the criteria for who I'll include.
Okay.
First, of course, characters that just didn't appear in any form. However, with this many background faces, you kind of have to specify what a character is. So, for the sake of the video, those who will be included must have a name, a notable line, and preferably more than one appearance. Which basically means characters like my boy Gary here won't be included despite being named, as he's introduced in the same panel he dies. Second, I'll include characters that were changed significantly from their original depiction in the comic. I don't mean characters who had their stories changed, as that would apply for most across the series, including Rick Grimes himself. I mean characters that were fundamentally altered from the start, whether that's through swapping genders, drastically altering their age, or characters that were essentially adaptations in name only, as you'll see with our first entries. And lastly, I will mention characters that were adapted but may have been missed while watching, as they were relegated to background faces with very little screen time, which actually happens more than you think. But with that, expect spoilers for both the entire show and comic. And if you end up enjoying this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit that like button and drop a sub to see more content like this. Now, I'm going to go through the cast of characters as they were introduced volume by volume. And for the first chapter, most characters from the Atlanta camp were translated pretty much one-to-one. The only exceptions being Donna, Alan, their twin sons Ben and Billy, along with Carol, who is almost unrecognizable. The Moraleses do fill the role of a family with 2 children inside the camp, but they are their own characters with their own journey entirely. However, what some of you may not have realized is Donna, Alan, and Ben actually did get an adaptation in Season 3 as we see them arrive at the prison with Tyrese and Sasha. Although, unfortunately, it seemed like their inclusion was just an Easter egg for comic fans, as all 3 were changed significantly and killed off by the end of the season with very little impact to the story. The case of Ben in particular is pretty interesting, as obviously he doesn't have a twin, but was also aged up in order to have another somewhat recognizable face in the governor's army. At least that's why I assume. But come season 4, Ben would actually receive yet another adaptation through Lizzie, and by extension Mika with Billy, as we see with how their story plays out in the end. Carol is basically a different character entirely in appearance, personality, and plotline. The only thing recognizable is her name and connection with Sophia, although I think most would agree this was for the best. Jumping ahead, Julie and Chris, the daughter of Tyrese and her defiant boyfriend, saw no such adaptation in the show. Obviously, the closest character you could say was an adaptation is Sasha, as she is the sister of Tyrese, but these are not the same character in any way. I assume the change was done because the writers had a much different direction in mind for Tyrese's character from the get-go, but if I'm being honest, despite liking comic Tyrese far more, I'd take Sasha over Julie and Chris any day. Now, the Green family in the show saw significant changes in comparison to their comic counterparts. You see, the comic version of Herschel has 7 children opposed to the 2 daughters and a stepson in the show. The kids excluded consist of Lacey, Arnold, Billy, Rachel, and Susie, with Maggie and Sean remaining the only constants. Although we do hear the names Lacey and Arnold spoken by Maggie when referring to the walkers in the barn. However, Arnold is specified as her cousin, and Lacey isn't seen on screen but is presumed to be a neighbor or extended family member. I honestly prefer the way the show portrays them, as it's hard to deny most of the kids here in the comic were just cannon fodder for crazy bloody moments early on. However, I think you could argue Beth was initially made as an adaptation of both Rachel and Susie, as she is the youngest, and was supposed to receive a similar death to the twins in Season 3 at the hands of Axel before it was changed. And speaking of the prisoners, they're a pretty interesting case, as the only characters that are close to being one-to-one adaptations are Axel and Andrew, with Dexter and Thomas Richards' roles being somewhat combined into Tomas. Oscar and Big Tiny seem to be original characters, but take some of Axel's good-natured traits, while Tomas nearly shares a name with Thomas in the comics, but acts as more of a Dexter, with him being the ringleader. Meaning the role Thomas Richards plays as a covert serial killer pretending to be in for tax fraud is the only one that really gets left behind in adaptation.
That would have been interesting.
But as mentioned, Glenn Mazzara's original plan saw Axel beheading Beth, so it seems like our favorite convenience store robber was supposed to have some of that Thomas Richards energy within him.
That would have been
Next up is Woodbury, and here we encounter a bit of an issue. To your average comic reader, there are only a handful of recognizable characters within the town we don't see in the show.
That was kind of stupid.
However, if you're a novel reader, you're more than likely familiar with most of the population. Now, I had a section here recorded and edited where I went through every name one by one, but if I'm being honest, it was already nearing 3 minutes long as is and was extremely boring. Even if you have read the novels, as there are so many people within this town. Right. So I've decided to just focus on the ones you'd be familiar with if you've only read the comics. I hope that's understandable, as I don't want to keep you here all day. So with that being said, comic characters we are more familiar with in Woodbury excluded from the show include Bruce, Eugene, Harold, Gabe, and Alice.
Yeah, I'm sure.
For some reason, I was convinced Dr. Stevens didn't have an adaptation, but I was very wrong. Not only is there a gender-bent Dr. Stevens within Woodbury with very few lines, but there's also a Dr. Stephen Edwards within Grady Memorial Hospital who looks much closer to what you would expect from that character, so I'm gonna count him. I understand why Alice was excluded, as with Herschel present and Lori having already given birth, she wouldn't really have served a purpose within the prison. And the role Gabe plays in the story is essentially just a Woodbury lieutenant, so you could argue Schubert fills that position just fine. While characters like Martinez have their stories switched up, but generally remain the same in personality. In between the prison and safe zone, most of the characters our survivors meet are pretty close to their comic counterparts. The Marauders were changed into the Claimers and were expanded on significantly with far more personality, while the Hunters lineup essentially stayed the exact same, with the only exception of Chris being renamed Gareth, and instead of Charlie and David, we get Martin and Mike. Although they are basically the exact same characters in purpose. But as we arrive at the Alexandria safe zone pre-time jump, the most notable change comes with Douglas and Regina Monroe, who swap genders in the show, with Deanna Monroe taking the role of leader, while Reg takes on the role of community architect. A much needed improvement over Regina, who's just kinda there and angry. Some characters such as Holly, Mikey, Barbara, and Aaron are present, but are given very little screen time or killed off prematurely and could easily be missed for most viewers. However, there are still a handful of characters we never see in the show, these being Vincent, his wife Julia, and son Josh, while characters like Clyde and Jamie of the construction crew border on Alexandria Resident 16 and 17 territory, but were excluded from the show nonetheless. For the longest time, I was under the impression Bruce was left without an adaptation, but apparently he did, and he lasted all the way till the end of Season 8. So sorry, Bruce. Nicholas's wife and Mikey's mom in the comics, Paula, doesn't seem to be present in the show, but there is a character named Paula we meet a part of the Saviors. However, I think it would be a pretty far stretch to say this is supposed to be an adaptation. A group you may have forgotten in between all the craziness of the series is the Scavengers. Not the garbage people by the same name in the show, but a group of plunderers that draw the mega horde towards Alexandria through a short skirmish. The show expands on this concept with the Wolves, who attack the safe zone in a somewhat similar manner, but in name and characterization, these are original characters. Were a little better. However, this whole event wasn't about who attacked. It was about the damage they caused, so I'm more than okay with the Scavengers getting turned into a more memorable group with actual personality. Much like the Claimers. They took down the walls and stuff like that. Is anyone really that upset we got Owen over Derek? Moving on to the rest of the coalition, specifically the Hilltop pre-time jump, pretty much every major and supporting character is present here. Even obscure ones like Nurse Alex and Brienne, with Johnny and Samuel being the only named characters I could find that didn't have an adaptation. Although these are both very minor characters. Oscar is present in the show, but looks nothing like his comic counterpart. I mean, seriously, how are you not gonna give this guy the beard? Unsurprisingly, with how little it was developed in the comic, The Kingdom has no notable pre-time jump characters without an adaptation. In fact, the show was so starved to give this community personality that it took a random character named Benjamin from after the time jump in the comic and made him have a full story arc and death in the show. The Saviors, for the most part, are pretty well covered as well in terms of characters adapted from the comic. There are a few briefly named minor saviors unseen in the show, such as Connor, Seth, Paul, Davis, and Christopher, while some you wouldn't have expected to have originated from the comics actually do, such as Gavin and Tara. Although, I guess to avoid confusion with the other Tara, the show just spelled her name backwards and called her a rod. However, in my opinion, one of the more egregious disclusions in the show is John, a man with a scarred eye that would later take over the Sanctuary. This character always stuck out to me despite how minor he was overall, as after disbanding from the Coalition, he actually led the Sanctuary to prosper as an independent community. Obviously, the show went in another direction with the Saviors, which is fine, but why did we get Jed when John could have filled that role while getting to show off his memorable design? But that is it for all the characters I found pre-time jump. Now, let's take a look at the discluded or altered faces we meet come the new beginning. Starting out with Magna's group. For the most part, the show kept these characters the same with the exceptions of Connie and Kelly. In the comics, they are actually dating, not siblings. And Kelly is a man, while Connie is nothing like her show counterpart and isn't hard of hearing. In general, their adaptations are far better characters with much more screen time,
with no hearing and stuff
I don't really
like
think that's a controversial thing to say. Here, Magna's group actually stays within the rebuilt and prospering safe zone, where we see a handful of additional characters that never appeared in the show, such as Annie, Darius, and Paul, while the Hilltop sees far more new additions discluded, such as Roland, brothers Larry and Louie, Brian, Wes, and Doug, while Morton Rose, Mr. and Mrs. Harland, as well as their son, were also left unadapted due to the disclusion of Rick and Carl from the New Beginning arc. However, despite Morton's absence, Brandon and Tammy Rose were remixed into the show, with both of them generally keeping their plot lines but switching up their family relations. As for the Kingdom in the New Beginning, we actually do have a few minor characters who weren't included in the show, those of which being guards named Gus, Brian, and Taylor, as well as Zachary and William as they fight for power following Ezekiel's death. This never really went anywhere that important in the comics besides new leadership for the Kingdom, a community that falls around this same point in the show, so it's not surprising they weren't included. Oceanside is even less fleshed out in the comic than the Kingdom is. The only notable characters to come from it are Sadiq, who generally stays the same as his show counterpart, just with a different occupation, and Pete, who also plays a role in the Michonne spin-off Telltale season, but is nowhere to be seen on screen. There are no new additions among the saviors we meet post-time jump, so that concludes this section on the Coalition. The Whisperers are largely known for not using names, but there are a few of note that joined the Coalition post-war, those being Josh, Mike, and his wife. But moving on to the Commonwealth, despite its far larger population than any other community we've seen in the show, there are actually far fewer disclusions than you'd expect. Samuels, George, Rufus, Jerome, Nancy, and Maxwell Hawkins are all minor Commonwealth soldiers, civilians, or politicians that were named and given lines but never featured in the show. There are characters named Frost in both interpretations of the story. However, despite being a unique name, the show's Frost is a part of Maggie's group who dies to the Reapers, so I guess it's up to you to decide if this was intended to be an adaptation or not. While Michonne's daughter Elodie and by extension dead daughter Colette are instead replaced with the far younger Andre who passed during the outbreak. Yumiko's brother Tommy fills the role Elodie plays in the comics, but is a far different character in terms of personality. There are a couple residents of Greenville we meet, such as Cloris, that weren't included, but that community is never seen or mentioned on screen, and it's not even very notable in the comics anyway, aside from being under the Commonwealth banner.
Oh, okay.
But lastly,
so, no point.
The final issue of the comic introduced us to Sheriff Kapoor of the Commonwealth, Lydia's husband Connor, who isn't an important character by any means and could easily be replaced with Elijah anyway, and of course, Andrea Grimes, Carl's daughter that wasn't included for obvious reasons. The ending of the comic is far different than what we see in the show, as it skips many years ahead into the future. So it is possible we could see Sheriff Kapoor adapted one day. Hell, now that I think about it, we'll probably eventually also see some version of Andrea Grimes as well through a grown-up Judith. But obviously, it would be in concept only, not name.
That'd be kind of cool.
I could even see a future where she has a son and names him Carl in honor of her dead brother.
That's
and
not
just
a bad
to include
idea.
a
That'd
little
be kind of
bonus,
cool.
The show never saw an adaptation of Claudia or Jeffrey Grimes either. Rick's brother from the spin-off comic The Alien Who Died During the Outbreak. By now, if they were gonna do Jeffrey, I think they would have already. So, unless they're planning on making Daryl Dixon's Season 3 extremely contrived,
that other woman looked
I don't think we're ever going to see an adaptation of these characters in the show. But those are all the characters I could find that were discluded or
Rick's
heavily changed from the Walking Dead
That'd be
comics.
An interesting
if there's
story.
someone I missed, definitely let me know in the comments down below. This is a really long series, so it's totally possible some...
That would be kind of cool to see, you know, Rick's brother still be alive, and that'd make for a very interesting story. Can you just imagine if, like, Rick's brother was just over there in the UK or Spain or something like that, and found Daryl, and yeah, my name is Jeff Grimes. What? You know, that'd make for a very interesting story. Then he goes back with him and stuff like that, and then Daryl finds out Rick is still alive, and then his brother's there. I don't know. That'd be a very cool reunion and stuff like that. That'd be kind of interesting. You know? Hey, here's Michonne. Here's my son RJ and my daughter Judith and stuff like that. And his brother's meeting him for the very first time. That'd be kind of cool. You know, not gonna lie, that would be very cool to see. But who knows? Whatever, you know, plans they have for the shows. I don't know what who knows what the plan is. I mean, you know, we still got Dead City going on. We still got Daryl Dixon going on. Yeah, I don't know what could ever happen after that. Obviously, the big thing is, you know, just a big reunion and stuff like that with Daryl and Rick. But of course, once that happens, that's kind of like the end, because, like, all right, they reunited. Now what, you know? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would like to see more Rick and stuff like that, but yeah, don't really know what's happening, while the spin-offs are going on and stuff. Who knows, you know? But yeah, it was pretty interesting to check out and stuff like that, you know. A lot of minor characters and stuff like that. Some, yeah, quite a bit got changed, gender swapped. Some for the best, some not so much. You know, some characters just never made it in, but other characters kind of picked up those traits and roles and stuff like that, and kind of ran with them and stuff. The Axel one would have been very interesting. I think I remember hearing something about that. Like, they cut, I think it was that idea, because at the time they thought that was, like, way too dark and stuff like that. You know, little be known how things would have gone later on, but that would have been very cool. That definitely probably would have jumped. I think that probably could have been like the second most, like, significant character death in the entire show if that happened, you know, especially not knowing about Axel or something like that, and, you know, he was just playing the character that he was. And just imagine, I don't know, just imagine how they could have pulled that off. That would have been, yeah, that would have been dark as hell. Like, can you just imagine, like, Carol just walking by the cells, and she just turns in, and there's, like, Axel just, like, sawing Beth's head off? Like, and he's just sitting there, just, you know, the sick smile, just like holding her mouth shut or something like that, and just beheading her. Like, yeah, that would have been, ooh, wow. Yeah, that would have been insane. That would have been crazy as hell. I mean, granted, that probably would have outshined the governor, you know, because the governor was, you know, the main villain at the time, and you kind of don't want to out crazy the main crazy guy, you know, because yes, he did have some really powerful moments and stuff, but like something like that, like, man, like Governor who, you know, I mean, that, yeah, oof. But still, that would have been insane. I think that would have been kind of a better ending than kind of what she got. You know, the whole shot allegedly in the head, even though like the gun wasn't pointed in that direction. You know, in that hospital and silly storyline, you know, I didn't even care for those episodes at all. I mean, like those ones they can probably like skip, you know. So yeah, but yeah, a lot of cool characters and stuff like that. Kind of sucks some got missed out, and you know, some got swapped for the better, like I said. Some got swapped for the worst. Some were just like little Easter eggs and stuff like that, which was pretty cool at least. You know, hey, they're not like big characters in the comics. You know, they didn't really do any much, but hey, we'll name drop them, or kind of like, you know, yeah, there's so-and-so here, you know. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, just seeing how basically everything changed. It is kind of a shame he didn't go into like more of like, you know, the changes they took, like of Carl dying and Jesus getting killed off, and you know, like how like Tyrese and Abraham were going to be like Rick's right hand man, but Daryl kind of filled that spot, so that changed, you know, their whole storylines and stuff like that. So I'm surprised they didn't go into that type of stuff, but still, very cool. And yeah, I mean, seeing some characters fully adapted correctly, it seemed like Scott Gimple in his earlier times did, you know, I mean, we all know it's a love-hate relationship with, you know, Scott Gimple. Like, yes, he did make some of the best episodes in the entire show, and also some of the worst. So, you know, and he did adapt quite a few characters spot on. So, yeah, you know. But, yeah, overall, very cool episode, or very cool video, I should say. Yeah, just seeing how, you know, how much different everything changed. You know, I think that would have been crazy with trying to write, like, 7 storylines for Herschel's 7 kids and stuff like that. Like, I guess even if they didn't have anything, you know, still being there, and gotta say, like, a few words. You can't just kind of, like, stand around, like, I don't know. I mean, they just would have been cannon fodder, zombie fodder, whatever you want to call them anyways, but still. Yeah. Alright, so anyways, there we go. There is the video. Very cool checking out how everything has drastically changed from comics to the TV show. So, yeah. But anyways, let me know all your thoughts and comments down below. What do you guys think about some of the changes? Did you like them? Did you not like them? Which ones did you like the most? Which ones did you not like at all? Let me know. And of course, if there's any other Walking Dead videos you want me to check out, let me know down below in the comment section. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. And other than that, just stick around. More videos are on the way. And I will see you guys next time.